Look down at the floor beneath you. It feels totally solid. It is easy to assume the ground we walk on is permanent and has always been this way. But when you look out across East Africa, you see shapes that don't quite make sense. Huge, flat-topped rock towers sitting right in the middle of wide, grassy plains. How did those get there? The truth is, the earth beneath our feet is entirely restless. East Africa is actually a giant shifting puzzle, actively pulling apart and rebuilding itself over millions of years. Think of the landscape as a massive construction site run by two opposing teams. Deep underground, you have the builders, massive heat and pressure pushing the land up. Up on the surface, you have the carvers, moving water and ice slicing the rock back down. To understand how this beautiful region actually took shape, we need to enter the Earth's sculptor's studio and watch these invisible forces create the world we live in. We will start with the builders. The Earth's outer rock shell is not one solid piece. It is cracked into massive plates. Deep inside the planet, extreme heat forces these giant rock plates to move, dragging the surface of the Earth along with them. This diagram shows what happens when those plates are pulled in opposite directions. We call this stretching force tension. As the crust pulls apart, the rock eventually snaps under the strain, creating two long, parallel cracks. With the ground stretching away on both sides, the middle section of rock loses its support and slides straight down into the gap. You are left with a deep trench with very steep sides, known as a rift valley. When you look out over the Great Rift Valley in western Uganda, you are looking directly at a massive sunken block of earth created entirely by those underground stretching forces. Plates can also crash into each other. This diagram shows the squeezing action, which we call compression. When the crust is squeezed tightly enough, it cracks, and the intense pressure forces a chunk of solid rock straight up into the sky. This creates a block mountain, like the towering Rwenzoris, entirely without a single volcanic eruption. By simply pulling and pushing from deep underground, the builders managed to sink the deepest valleys and raise the tallest mountain peaks. The builders have another, much hotter tool. Sometimes deep cracks allow melted rock, called magma, to escape to the surface as lava. Over time, that cooling lava piles up layer by layer to form massive volcanic cones, like Mount Elgon. And sometimes the Earth's crust doesn't crack or erupt at all. When gentle pressure is applied over a very wide area, the solid rock simply bends. In East Africa, a huge section of the crust sagged downwards to form a shallow bowl. As this massive basin sank, it altered the slope of the surrounding land. Rivers that once flowed away were forced to reverse direction, slowly filling the bowl with water. That massive, gently bent depression in the Earth's surface became Lake Victoria. Between erupting hot lava, cracking deep valleys, and bending the crust to hold massive lakes, the builders lay the heavy foundation for the entire region. Now let's look at the carvers. These are erosional forces above ground that act like giant sandpaper, smoothing out and slicing through the rough rock left behind by the builders. Moving water is the most powerful carver of all. High up in the mountains, a river acts like a highly energetic young person. The fast, steep water cuts deep V-shaped valleys and plunges over rocky cliffs to create spectacular waterfalls. As the river reaches flat land, it enters its mature stage. The water slows down. Instead of cutting straight down, it wanders lazily from side to side, carving wide loops called meanders. Finally, right before it meets a lake, the river enters old age. It loses its energy entirely and drops all the mud and sand it was carrying, spreading out into wide, fan-shaped wetlands known as deltas. But water doesn't only carve in liquid form. Up in the freezing heights of the Rwenzori Mountains, snow packs together into heavy rivers of ice called glaciers. As these glaciers slide slowly downhill, they crush the rock beneath them. They grind out distinct, wide, flat-bottomed valleys that look exactly like the letter U. Without the carvers relentlessly washing, grinding, and slicing the rough stone, East Africa would just be a harsh collection of towering peaks and cracked ground. All this pushing, pulling, and grinding serves a much larger purpose. These forces are actively creating the conditions required to sustain human life. When rain and temperature changes strike the hard volcanic and mountain rocks, they slowly break them apart in a process called weathering. Over thousands of years, solid stone crumbles into tiny particles. Those tiny weathered rock particles form the rich, dark soil that feeds Ugandan farmers and powers the region's agricultural economy. And those huge bent basins and deep rift valleys safely hold the fresh water that millions of people rely on for drinking and fishing. The East African landscape is not a static picture. It is a working, moving system that builds the mountains, carves the valleys, and feeds the people who call it home.